So this is I wanted to do a kind of not really a live stream, but just a recording of the writing process and what I'm trying to do with an edit. I decided to edit the first chapter of Iorneste, a dragon story, which I'm basically writing in blog format, as it comes to me in a first draft on the web. But there is a writing competition that I thought I could enter with the story that allows up to 15,000 words. And so I thought if I was going to enter it in a writing competition, I should at least make a pass at editing it. And then I thought I might as well, some artists will actually record the process of them cleaning things up. So I thought I'd do that here. So if you haven't read the first chapter of Iorneste yet, I would recommend doing that before seeing this because there are spoilers and everything. So from this point forward, I'm assuming you have read the first chapter in its raw form and are interested in seeing, the final product, but also just the process of updating this. So um, we'll start with the very beginning. So right off the bat, I made some comments for myself here in Google Docs. Um, right off the bat, you'll notice that um, there's a lot of information here being delivered. It's just all exposition, kind of. I mean, it shows Uranus flying, and it says he's late for the meeting, but it gives a lot of exposition kind of stuff and talks about how old he is, and um, the first exile is talked about, and but it's not delivered through anything other than tell. There's not really any show, and that kind of follows into the next, sections here as well. We're not starting out the reader in any kind of, particularly interesting place unless they want to kind of, weave themselves into the story. But it's not really how your first chapter should be written if you want to engage the reader. So that will probably be cut, like completely cut, because a lot of this gets revealed and referred. It kind of refers back to this later in the story anyway, and by refers back to, I mean makes this now kind of unnecessary. I mean, in a way, when I'm writing the first draft, I'm writing it for myself. I'm writing it so I can, um, figure out for myself what the world is, because I'm not plotting this. I'm kind of writing this as I go, which means that I'm going to have to edit this to make it, to fill plot holes and to, um, add back details, and just first drafts are messy, right? But I'm not like mad at myself for writing stuff that I didn't need. I mean, you have to, as I say, to mine out the gems, you have to have rocks too. You have to lay all that down, and then you get to kind of dig through it as dispassionately as possible, as if you're reading someone else's work. And so that's what I'm doing here with these notes. And I just want to walk through some of the notes I made. I haven't made major edits at this point. I've made a few, but mostly I've just been leaving comments so I can talk about them. So I'm moving on to this section here. There's this section here about, it says that, dragons are not incredibly social, and it talks about, their introspection, and that they're very intelligent, and there's variance and all that stuff. This is all revealed later on in the second chapter. And when it's where it's not, I mean, the introspective nature of dragons and whatever, or at least of Iorneste, is well established later on. So this will be cut. I'll actually just completely probably delete this, just because it's not necessary. Um, so we get to the point which could be a potential starting point for the story, where Iorneste is actually seeing more and spiraling down. And there's different ways we could take this. We could play on the mythos of dragons as monsters, to show him kind of stalking out the tiny figure down below on the ground who's unaware of him, and swooping down, and not giving the reader an initial indication of where he's headed, and what his intentions are towards this little figure, but then realizing quickly that it's not. But it adds a sense of tension, right? And so I made some notes about that, um, that mention a few other aspects here that we're going to cut, like about how he is late, to add that sense of urgency, um, and maybe even mentioning that he's still punctual, by comparison to the elders of his kind, because time is a different thing for them. Um, But yeah, so that we can do all that. So then I'll move on to the next comment here. Um, yeah, there's another section here. Those of his kind who were interested watched his departure remotely. Though he was no longer a hatchling, Iorneste would need to learn to blend in among humans as one of his own. This is all explained, so it's unnecessary. And even if it's not, we can deliver the information some other way. And I'll have to check this too. Like when I remove stuff, I'll have to make sure that that information does get delivered somewhere else. Um, so then then we get into kind of the style edits, right? So we've got extra adverbs landed gracefully on the ground, and that's fine, but it's kind of lazy, and it should be somehow implied, but also, uh, somehow allowed by the reader's imagination. If they don't want to imagine him landing, gracefully, I don't have to be heavy-handed and say it in their minds. You have to imagine a graceful landing, and it's just unnecessary, and it slows it down. And the more words that you add that aren't necessary, like adverbs, how does he land? He lands gracefully. It's just being kind of lazy. You could, even if you wanted to point out how graceful he was, you could illustrate that some other way. But to me, it's not important, at least not this phase of the game. Um, and ground is used twice, so I changed that to earth. You know, uh, this is actually a paragraph that got quoted with the chapter 1 image for this on DeviantArt, and I realized reading it how much I wanted to revise this. I mean, in a way, this could almost be the start of the story, but this has some edits I did and some notes, and I kind of want to talk about those a lot. So yeah, so right here, yeah, there's the adverb and everything, but the way it's rewritten, it says, Iorneste landed on the ground before morn, his claws flexing and leaving indentations in the earth. And I also got rid of before him, which was unnecessary. Iorneste inclined his head, and I got rid of the and spoke clearly because I mentioned him speaking down here, which is just wrong. Iorneste inclined his head, his wings flapping twice more before folding behind his back. Um, he settled back onto his haunches, his tail curling around him, the tip of it tapping idly at his scaly temple. So idly is an adverb that should probably be taken out, and I don't know if it's really idly anyway. Again, I like the kind of the beat, the emote, the description here. Um, so I might keep it, but breaking it up would probably be good somehow, so it's not so many things kind of happening in one swift motion. Um, and then this bugs me. Then he spoke in a soft but rich voice, like smooth velvet. And I wrote like curdled vomit because, like smoothed velvet. Like velvet is a feel, right? You can say like a velvety soft voice or something like that. But again, you're using more adverbs, and not like you should never, ever, ever, under any circumstances use adverbs, but most of the time you shouldn't. And so, like, smooth velvet is just vomit worthy to me. So I would, you could almost take this whole sentence and you really wouldn't lose much. Like, why do you care how he speaks? Like, is it important to tell the reader that, like, kind of what I wanted to say here was that his voice is not bestial and like rawr rawr dragon like. It's deceptively articulate and cultured and whatever, compared to what you would expect coming out of the mouth of the dragon. The problem is Iorneste is the viewpoint character. I mean, he's the main character in this scene, and there's some other things I have to scold myself for later in the scene where I'm getting inside Morin's head, and generally speaking, you should stick with one perspective character per scene, like the main character's head you're in. And I can flip back and forth. I can go into Morin's head, but again, I can't then talk about how Iorneste feels because Iorneste can't communicate how he feels in Morn's perspective scene. He can only communicate that through body language or through actually saying it or Morn inferring it somehow, right? But anyway, so could almost get rid of this how he speaks, right? But then I like this. Good day to you, Morn. I am here to begin the first exile and submit myself to your training to become human, like you. The somewhat stilted way and formal way that Iorneste talks it's central to his character. Um, it's his voice in the story. He is a scholar. But first and foremost, he is a scholar. I mean, he unnaturally has advantages. He is exceptionally strong. He's exceptionally tough. He has access to magical powers. In all these areas he excels. I wanted to invert the story. In the hero's journey, usually you start out small and weak and frail, and then you have to build up your power. And not that he won't necessarily in the story, or won't face enemies more his scale, but the truth of the matter is that without having to exercise or do anything in particular, he just innately has more aptitude than most humans do. So in the body of this monster, of this dragon, of this beast, or of his 6.5 foot tall self, as a human, there's the mind of this analytical, um, somewhat misanthropic scholar, and that has been really fun for me to play with. So I like that his sort of first words in the story are odd, a little odd. And the whole thing of, to become human like you is somewhat naive. It's not like he could ever become human. He can only ever pretend to be human, and he can get good at it, and he can even get, pulled into its world. But at the end of the day, after his first exile, after his 25 years are up, he gets to be a dragon again, and do as he sees fit as an adult in dragon society. So I like the idea of this time as being a time of innocence for dragons as well, where they've been not so much sheltered in their society because they're still beasts, they're still dragons, but they are so not sheltered, but they still aren't involved in the larger politics. They don't understand their society as well as obviously the elders do, and they're kept out of it mostly. I mean, they're given errands to run, or they're allowed to sort of indulge themselves and explore their talents and there's sort of I haven't written this in or anything, but there's sort of a community or fraternity in the sense that you know a dragon doesn't necessarily stay with his parents. He might foster or hang out at other places for a while, until they get sick of him and tell him to leave. And if the dragon himself doesn't seek, or herself does not seek solitude on their own, which they're certainly apt to do. So things just work differently with them. You don't generally have a problem of like unwelcome guests among dragons. So anyway, I like all that, and then Morn smiles, but only just. And I had this problem in the story now where everyone's smiling all the time, and I've got to just get rid of that because smiling. Yes, I mean there are times I have to be like, okay, yes, legitimately this character smiles right here, and in my mind they're smiling, but I don't necessarily have to tell people that they're smiling. However, the phrase "but only just" modifies the smile somewhat. It gives it character. He's not just smiling. He's only just smiling. He's still reserved. He's being formal here. It gives a hint of his character. He isn't letting himself getting carried away with this dragon he just met. He's smiling, but kind of politely. But if I said politely, that would be an adverb. But only just, you know, I don't know. I think the reader just kind of gets that right away. Like, oh, he smiles, but only just. He just gives just a hint of a smile. And again, a hint of a smile is kind of a cliche as well. A hint of a smile played across his features. I would use a phrase like that in the first draft, and then I would be forced to cut it later because I'd read it and I would say that just sounds too pat, you know, and again, unnecessary. So anyway, I'm keeping that smile, but only because only just in my first draft saves it. So, give this mention of females. Dragons talk about males and females a lot, and I realize that in certain contexts, those are hot words to use right now. But I think for dragons, again, they're a different group. Male and female roles are very important to them, and so they use that. But you know, more in referring to and females, he is kin. He is not directly, exactly human. But I still don't think he would refer to his own kind. You might say nobles and women, but again, it's a stereotype that women have longer names, and so I just think it's probably, you would see it both in males and females in the nobility. So, it's just unnecessary. Nobility often have longer ones. Saves time. Morn chuckles. Just too much chuckling, too much laughing. Yeah, I mean, he probably does find it amusing. Maybe we can find some way of conveying that. and nodded. And this is something that plagues me. Everyone is nodding. Not only are they smiling, but they're all nodding. So, gotta excise that. Um, uncomfortably. Shifted uncomfortably. So, at this point, okay, there's another adverb, of course, uncomfortably. Um, This note, I think, is astute of me. Go me. He's not going to be a dragon for long. Describing the shift of a dragon's body to express discomfort would actually be way more interesting here. And it's true. I mean, I'm not going to depict him as a dragon. I haven't depicted dragons doing dragon things very much in the story, and that's sort of the fun paradox of the story. It's a dragon story, and then you go from seeing him as a dragon to almost immediately in the first chapter seeing him in the body of a human being, and that's where he is, going to stay for 25 years, i.e., the whole story. Um, so, playing on that is, part of what makes the story, right? But you should still see him as a dragon a little bit. You should sort of see what he's losing, what he's giving up. If nothing else, you should see the mannerisms. Like, what does an uncomfortable shift look like for a dragon? Like, that's going to be this is an area where editing isn't going to remove something, it's probably going to add something. So who knows what the actual size of this will be. It's at 12 pages right now. It could end up being longer. So I like all this. I'm not really going to complain about any of that. It's okay. Morton says it's okay. It's just too dressed. It's too okay is too modern. Saying the word okay in a fantasy novel is, at least for me, is not okay. Uh, I just think he could say something like apology accepted and then move on and say we should probably get started because he's down to business. He's got to keep this moving. He's got a job to do, and that's sort of his role in the story so far is to be the grown-up, who, um, casts a stern note of disapproval um, on the dragon, and who wises him up to information that he should probably already know, but he doesn't because he's a naive dragon that's in a human world. Um, So, then he goes on and says, I will begin your training. So I said, there were some details we cut at the beginning there about the first exile and that, um, it'll be for 25 years and blah, blah, blah. I mean, he could deliver that here. He could talk about, he could go on and say, just to be clear, it'll be for 25 years. So do you understand all of this, Iorneste? And Iorneste could say, yes. Then let's begin, and um, then he shapeshifts, which is kind of neat. How I've devised it in this world, essentially, that you can kind of shift your mass and weight and strength somewhat, but you will always be, if you're a larger creature, you will always be somewhat stronger, denser, heavier, more resilient than you would be, than a normal human would be. Um, and the weight thing has been quite a bit of fun to play with in the story. And I don't know exactly how much he weighs. Just it's a lot, and you know, um, it's in the hundreds of it's in like. I mean, it's 600 to 1,000 pounds, maybe, or more. I don't really know exactly. But it's a lot, and that would be compounded for even larger dragons taking human form. So like things like horses are right out. He can't ride a. I mean, he could maybe ride a. I don't know, a Clydesdale or something, but or some super bred war horse or something. But that's about as all he's gonna do. So anyway, I've got some quibbles here about shifting his density. I'm using shift right here in the same, not same sentence, but I mean visibly you can see them right above each other. Um, and shifting his density somewhat. Somewhat is such a lazy word to use here. Okay, he shifted it somewhat. The reader knows nothing. That doesn't mean anything. Um, so, yeah, needs more clarity or expungement is what I said. Grow and grow. Grow shorter, and then you grow, I mean, it may be okay because you say while it grows here, it also grows here. But, I don't know. Could be rewritten. Um, since we're using scales here, I'm going to change scale to size. I mentioned that he's obsidian because I don't mention it anywhere else in the story. and I might as well just throw it in here. It's defined by the artist. The artist defined him as, I mean, I gave that input to the artist, but until the artist asked, I hadn't really even thought about the color of his scales. And he's part of the obsidian family of, his matriarchal line, his bloodline is obsidian. Um, so it goes. So I mentioned that he loses his color, which I know black isn't a color, but whatever. Uh, I mentioned that last ago, a bit tellingly were his wings. Now, a bit tellingly is a bit too telegraphing, in that, oh, he's going to miss his wings, especially when right after that he lets out a sigh of regret. I mentioned a palpable sigh of regret, which, palpable, I don't know. Like, palpable is almost more like tangible or something to me. Like, I just don't like it. I think it's a word that should be removed. Letting out a sigh as they faded away would even work. A sigh of regret would work. I'd be okay with sigh of regret. So here we go. Morn said critically. He critically said it, and he's going to critically say something else shortly down here below. And it's just unnecessary. Biting his lower lip. This is actually something it's not his fault here, but other characters do it. And I think Iorneste says that's because I mentioned that he learned it, but he learned it from some other character who I never even. Anyway, it's not important. Biting his lower lip probably needs to be changed to something here. But it does kind of convey that he's almost trying not to laugh. Like, you're a bit too orange, and he just bites his lip. So, I might keep that, but critically goes. There's no keeping it. In fact, I'm just gonna delete it right now. So then, here's a good one. This is something I really wanted to focus on in this video. This is where I just decided just to do a rewrite, and um, so I'll explain why I did what I did. So it says, "Give me your hand, Morn," Iorneste said. In the original, it says like Morn helped him to his feet, and he immediately began to wobble, falling forward and slapping his hands around Morn's neck to keep from falling again. And then Morn struggled to remain standing as much as Iorneste's strength still remained, regardless of his form. Basically, my point on all this is that um, show don't tell, right? The fact that he has greater than average size should be demonstrated, not that he struggles to remain standing. Okay, I get it, but let's show how he struggles. So the way I write this is Morn tried to help because Morn realizes suddenly, straining with the effort, feet slipping on the ground, that Iorneste is just heavy. Upon reaching so I could remove that line actually about density above, and you know, um, there's somewhere else I mention it where they keep most of the mass of their form. Oh yeah, much of his strength still remained regardless of his form. Um, yeah, that's made clear elsewhere, so it definitely does go. So it becomes, for his part, Morn bore this mass with a buckling of his knees and a grimace. I added that. Just that once he slips forward and falls again, and begins to wobble, began to wobble. That's another one to watch out for. A phrase I see a lot. Begins to or began to, started to. You didn't start to laugh. You're laughing. It's important. It's not important. So here I say, I get rid of this. Sorry, just hold me up a second. I needed a closer look at you. This is, saying it, but it doesn't need to be said because he's already asking him, you know, he's already holding him up. He doesn't have to ask him to hold him up. And saying I need a closer look is obvious when he can study him more carefully at proximity. Which created an interesting problem when I added this line, studied, because now Morn is studying Iorneste. So what I decided to do is, basically play on that. He studies Morn, and then Morn studies Iorneste in return, instead of for a moment, which is bad anyway. Looking up and down, and then coughed delicately. Coughing delicately has sort of a connotation that I'm willing to keep. I'll allow this adverb to stay, because kind of those delicate coughs, you kind of know that he's talking about a delicate subject. He's coughing delicately about, like that. So I think that's okay. But then this, he pulled his pants down and pointed meaningfully. Well, he's pointing, and it's probably inferred that it's a meaningful point at his genitals. Um, so this is an example of something that I left mostly intact in my first chapter is a penis joke. Although I have to say it's one of the more tasteful penis jokes ever committed um, to print, if I do say so myself. So anyway, I go through all of that, and here's that beginning to laugh. So it really should just be, laughing uproariously, which means I should, get rid of the other laughing here or change it somehow. And yeah, so here we go. Morin's looking him over critically again, and even looking him over, that is fine. Walking around him in a circle, inspected him would probably be better. This was, after all, going to be Iorneste's primary form for the next quarter century, but in the end, he could find nothing to object to. The problem here is actually not just that we are revealing some information that we could reveal some other way, but that we're kind of getting into Morn's head here. It would almost be Morn delivering this information. This is going to be, after all, Iorneste's primary form for the next quarter century. But in the end, he could find nothing to object to. Like, you could just say, walking around in a circle, but in the end, he could find nothing to object to. Then he gets too formal and modern and says, I think you're good. Are we good? We're good. Yeah, that's not good to me. It's. I'm not ruling out that people don't talk like that somewhere in the world, but definitely Morton doesn't talk like that. Um, I mean, he is not quite as cluelessly, I guess, scholarly as Iorneste is in his speech, which is interesting because I do have to kind of dumb his speech down a little bit, but not as I still I still have two kind of scholars, right? Two learned men encountering a world of people who are mostly not as learned as them. Um, so that's kind of a different tack to take in a story too, I think. Um, and then I have an awkward uh, action here. He says, of course I can walk. He takes an experimental step and buckled forward and caught himself on the ground with his left arm. Well, first off, it doesn't matter what arm he catches himself with on the ground. Um, but really, it can just be rewritten as something, buckled forward, um, going to his knees or taking a knee or something like that, right? I mean, I don't know what I want to rewrite it to right now, but it's not important right now. It just needs to be restructured for flow. Um, so here's some stuff. Like, this is where you kind of see how cool Iorneste is going to be, and I mentioned that it's probably important to deliver it because future superhuman feats he's going to do will be justified by explaining this, that he's running faster and jumping higher and all that stuff. But there's a bit of showing off here that's really not necessary. You know, he could run up a tree and backflip. Is cool in a kung fu movie. And again, I'm not ruling out that he won't run up a tree and backflip someday, but it should be a little more significant than just, oh yeah, he just decides, the dragon, to run up a tree and backflip. With his size as well, I mean, the tree is going to take, the weight of him, against it as he runs up it. Not that that'll break down every tree he tries to do that on, but anyway, it's just not necessary. It's too much kung fu, and it's just not necessary. And the story is understated. That's kind of the fun thing, is that I haven't given him hordes of faceless enemies to mow through or anything like that. I mean, I could. Well, again, not saying it won't happen yet. But the story has been one of escalation. I mean, he is incredibly powerful. You don't want to see him at his, utmost exertion at the beginning of the story. You sort of know it's there, and part of the excitement of the story is watching little bits of that come out. A taste of it here and there. But, in a different story, he would be on the battlefront in the first scene, but that's not what I wanted to do here with him. And this is more about him exploring what it's like to be a human as a dragon, coming to it from a fresh dragon perspective and getting into his head and his different take on morality and his different set of virtues, And that was the reason for developing the Drac virtues early on. It's just, what ideals does Drac society hold? And in many ways, they are selfish and unabashedly so. And so all that stuff, contributes to this, to his character adopts from that culture as well. There's a line here that's a little awkward. You're a better human than humans are. Than we are might work. You're a better human than we are, or something. But I don't like how that's phrased. So that should go. Ah, Iorneste said, smiling. He's smiling again. Is he really smiling? I don't know. But I merely look human. Um, this is a long sentence, but I really like it. As if to prove his point, the branch of the tree he was holding onto broke, sending him plummeting to the ground, breaking several more branches on the way, before landing with a palpable slam against the ground that Morn could feel vibrate up through his feet. Palpable could probably go too. Let's see. Then Morn stood up and pointed to the entrance to the tunnel nearby. So there needs to be a better transition. So basically, Iorneste is delivering valuable information here. I still possess most of the weight of my natural size. It's just hidden elsewhere. Again, this is delivered right here in dialogue. Um, so when Morn is being caught, it kind of is explained here. Even if I don't explain it earlier, even if it's not clear, I basically spelled it out multiple ways here. So I don't need to keep doing it. But then Morn just decides to, he just kind of doesn't respond to it at all and just points and says, I placed some things, let's, get going, which he might want to be saying like, okay, that's enough of this, let's get going, but he should transition better to saying that than this, because this just seems too abrupt. So that's my note to myself, to edit that somewhat. Either add another line of dialogue in here to kind of wrap it up and move on, um, or something else. So I got this. Uranus felt a warm thrill of excitement fill him. I don't know. I don't like it. It seems cliche. I don't know. It feels like something I've read before, um, but I don't know. It could just be he felt a warm thrill of excitement fill him. It could just be he felt a warm thrill. That would probably be fine. I'll edit it out for now. Okay. Though he'd taken other forms before as an experiment, he was coming to enjoy the human form. Though severely limiting in many ways, there was something undecidedly appealing with the form, and seeing things from a lower and more ground-limited perspective was already giving him new insights. Consider removing altogether is really going to be remove this altogether. It doesn't, like, yes, the drag can take other forms. They're not just dragon form or human form. They can be wolf forms, or I guess presumably fish forms or something, possessing all the same limitations. They're going to be heavier, more dense. They're going to be stronger, more resilient, all that, than that form would normally be. But they can do it, and with some degree of study, and acclimation, kind of like, humans require a longer period of acclimation because they have a whole cultural aspect to them. Animals are probably a bit easier. And in their younger life, when they're younger, I can imagine Dracs spend a lot of time, if they have this ability, shape-changing into other animals, birds and wolves and bears and things like that, and trying it out, and even living feral-like in the woods and associating in a way that with animals, and learning from them. It would explain a lot of their feral instincts and their innate propensity for being able to brawl and fight, and like dragons don't have to train to use tooth and nail. They sort of innately know it. It's instinctual. Um, so yeah. Anyway, ranging far afield there, but um, that's all very cool stuff that I've already thought of. But I don't have to talk about him taking other forms. I don't have to talk about him getting these new insights without talking about what they are, because I haven't talked about what these new insights are. They're not important here. So really, it can just go bye-bye. It can go bye-bye and go bye-bye. He was coming to enjoy the human form. Well, yeah, I think that's kind of clear that a warm thrill fills him and all that stuff. Like yeah, he's obviously excited. That's fine, but we don't have to give all this extra information to the reader and just bloat things up. So formal, more observed. I rewrote it, but gave Iorneste a friendly smile when he said it. The challenge of this book, stop everyone from smiling all the damn time. But it might actually be legit in this case. Okay, well, again, he gave him a friendly smile when he said it. I almost want to keep it because a friendly smile, but yeah, he is kind of saying, "Oh, you're so formal," but he's saying it jokingly, so there should be something to go along with it to indicate that, like a smile, um, but probably not a friendly smile. You know, he gave him an amending smile or something. It's just some way of a smile of amendment or smile to make amends, maybe. Um, yeah, no, not even that. That sounds wrong too. I don't know. Again, I'm just flagging problematic things. I'm not necessarily fixing them now. The next thing, the entrance had already been rolled back waiting for them, but it would close behind them when they left, ending only in solid rock for other non-magical visitors who might chance upon the location. Expose in dialogue or cut, because who cares? I mean, yeah, does it add anything to the story to know that this wall will disappear behind them? I think it's mentioned in chapter 2 anyway, that they look back and the wall is, already closed behind them. So it doesn't need to be here in the first chapter. It can be a mystery. Is that tunnel there all the time, or is it not? To the first chapter reader, it doesn't matter. Um, this needs to be restructured because of the weird assortment I had for visually adding a bunch of crates and boxes and lanterns and backpacks and things that just don't need to be there. I mean, really, all you need in this scene is a chest, a magical enchanted chest. You don't need a lantern because who cares about the light? The burning oil lantern here. You don't. I don't. I think I just saw a visual in my mind and thought I'm going to put a burning oil lantern there without thinking about why is there a burning oil lantern there. It just makes no sense. So it goes bye bye too. Um, so yeah. Um, so really though, in blocking, in terms they call this in screenwriting, blocking is like what's in the scene, what do you need to interact with, um, or the props basically. Um, I say there stood a wooden crate atop which was a burning oil lantern, which again there doesn't even have to be a damn crate. There can just be a wooden chest and two backpacks, and that's an enchanted wooden chest that has anything you could possibly need in it. That's really all you need to know here, and it's a magical culture. It's not like I have to explain it. It's magic. Move on. So moving down. I love this. Have you thought of a name? Yorn of Summersguard, said Iorneste. It will do. Why Summersguard? Now, the author at the time had no idea what the hell Summersguard is. It seemed kind of like a Nordic place, even though it says summer in the name. What it's turned into is it's sort of almost like a Vatican City, not really Vatican City, but Vatican is kind of its own isolated neutral ground, right? And so the great University of Summersguard and the small lands surrounding it are Summersguard, and it is basically neutral ground. It's a place of learning that everyone sort of contributes to, and their scholars come back and they reap the benefits of their knowledge in terms of medicine and things like that. Um, or magic, I suppose, presumably would still be, also being studied there. But yeah, it's in the world of the warring many kingdoms. It is the one place that is scholarly, which also fits nicely into Iorneste's story of being from Summersguard, because him speaking like a scholar and being from Summersguard, to people they put the two together. You're from Summersguard, okay, you're a student or something, or one of the few like hill people or something that still natively lives there. Um, but anyway, he gives the worst answer to this, the most unsatisfying answer. He recited from memory, because this was in a book. Just read this and tell me this was in a book. Its people are fair-skinned. They hail from lands not too far distant, and their physical features are characterized by hair of exquisite blondness and eyes of sea green. There's so many things wrong with this. Um, First off, yes, okay, you're a Nordic boy. You're blonde-haired and blue-eyed and all that stuff. Um, but why, yes, it matches your physical features that you chose for yourself, except for one problem. They're they're characterized by eyes of sea green. So why did you choose blue eyes? Why blue eyes, Iorneste? Why not green eyes? Why not be you know, a native summer's guardian? But he isn't. Apparently, he wanted to be different, and I didn't mention why that is that he chose blue, and he didn't question him. Yeah, well then why Why blue eyes, Iorneste? Yeah. They hail from lands not too far distant, because in the ancient book written, 2 feet away from the far side of the world, it was far distant. It's far distant from somewhere. It's not. That's not scholarly information. That's not justification for why you pick Yorn of Summersguard. And of course, we know later on why he picks Yorn of Summersguard, and it actually this is pretty much some bullshit that he's telling him right here. I mean, in context with that, what he's telling him here is complete bullshit. Like, well, yes, I mean, they tend to be blonde. He might say that. They tend to be blonde and lighter skinned, like me. Uh, but and actually, I could leave the lighter skin part off too, because I mentioned him being a little tan earlier. So, let people imagine him with a darker skin tone if they want. I don't particularly care. It's everybody's story. Um, but anyway, just more justifications for my edits or why I would change things. But yeah, so this needs to get edited, recited from memory. I mean, if I'm going to recite something from memory, it has to sound like something that would actually be in a book. And this doesn't sound like something in a book. It sounds like something the author just came up with, pulled out of his ass, which is exactly what happened. So, this all goes pretty well here. Obviously, I didn't have too many problems on this part of the... Well, no, I think I just didn't focus as much on this part. Um, no, I did. Let me go through a section here I thought was pretty good, you know, as is, or at least good enough to survive this cut. He talks about what he's good at and what he's not good at, and he suggests being a scribe, which I call back later in the story. I mentioned him thinking back like this would have been easier if I was a scribe. Um, so leaving this in makes sense. Um, I have a few minor things. For some reason, capitalizing scribe. Um, Iorneste should probably never use contractions or very, very sparingly, because he's just too proper for that. Um, and this all is pretty decent. I like this a lot. I mean, this is basically where um, Morn is doing stuff, and Iorneste is watching him and mimicking his body expression. So you're like, I can look like a human too if I start doing these weird monkey things. And that's good, right? But then it kind of goes bad again. Um, Iorneste, blessed with the patience of his kind, merely... I would just get rid of that. Iorneste waited for Morn to finish his thought. Waiting for his elders to finish a thought had often taken days, but Morn had only left him waiting for a few moments. That's that's a good detail to put in a story, but it also explains that he has the patience of his kind. Like, if everybody's taking days to complete conversations, then patience is definitely implied. So, flight is not possible, said Morn, returning his intention. So, instead of turning back to look, which turning to look, turning is another thing that gets overused a lot in stories. I'm turning this way to face you. Turns to face her as he said this. Um, so I just like this better. Returning his attention to Iorneste. Catching the dragon mimicking his exact pose and expression, he smiled involuntarily. So bad adverbs, bad. Yeah, I mean he smiled. He didn't smile. He just smiled. And again, did he really smile? Did he grin? Did he smirk? Did he... I don't know. Anyway, for quickly, covering the gesture. Quickly is another adverb. Pretending not to notice. Again, it's just awkward, and I don't know. I think that's kind of awkward. Unsettlingly, which is an adverb we don't need, he watched the mirror of his expressions flicker and disappear on Iorneste's face. He was watching with a focus and determination that went beyond unnerving. So, that went beyond unnerving. Again, this is from Iorneste's perspective primarily here. We're getting now into Morn's head again, and so we could describe how Morn reacts to this, by describing what it looks like. But now we're getting into Morn's head, and we're supposed to be in Iorneste's head here. And that's probably another larger problem with this chapter, is that we are still kind of I'm still trying to play it both ways here. I'm trying to have two perspective characters that I flip between. But it's confusing to the reader, and I don't know, it's a little dishonest in the story in a way. It just feels dishonest as a writer and to a reader when you can basically say something and then have immediate feedback from the other person into how it feels, and then so on and so forth. Like, at some point you need that um, observed, observer effect of observing someone's reaction to what a character is saying. And so if you want a normal person's reaction to a dragon in human form, you need the perspective of that scene to be from that character. Like if you need Morn's human perspective to reflect on something that Iorneste has done and gone, wow, that's such a dragonish thing to do. What a dragon you are. Um, you know, or wow, you're really out of place in a human setting here, Iorneste, because Iorneste isn't going to know, in some cases, that he's doing something that's wrong. Again, you need Morn to do that, either in Iorneste's scene by saying it through dialogue or indicating, in his body language that something's wrong. Um, or else, if it's Morn's scene, Morn can just think it and you can just relay it. Morn going, oh crap, and that's that. But I have a lot of problems with this in some chapters, and they're going to be really, really difficult to unravel because I hop back and forth way too much, and I'm going to lose something either way. Or not really lose something, but I'm going to have to rewrite lots of things that way. So I must always remember Morn thought that he is still one of the Drac. Yeah, I mean, just cut it because we're I use this. This is something I'm going to cut too, like a lot of places. But one chapter in particular, I'm going to cut half the chapter because of all of this crap going on. Um, Basically, it's a lazy way of getting in someone's head. It is permissible sometimes, but most of the time, no. So I'm going to get rid of it. Uranus blinked in surprise at that. He blinked in surprise at that. He blinked. Oh, magic? Yeah, I think he blinked in. If you blinked, You're gonna realize it was significant enough that it's a response. He blinked, like, whoa. You get that kind of just reading it. You don't need the in surprise at that. Um, let's see. Structuring this a little bit here for clarity. Morn says, I know that, and it is a powerful tool, but no human mage uses magic the same way as one of the Drac. It's a tell. You, and then I'm going to revise this because it's a little awkward. You might advertise yourself as a mage and try to make your way among humans as one, but any other mage who saw you performing magic would know you were doing something different than they are, and those with sufficient experience would know you for what you are immediately. It's too long, I think, and it could be more tersely represented by saying something like, you know, it's a tell. Humans don't perform magic like you do. Those who know what they're doing will sniff you, will sniff you out right away. It's a risk you can't take. Something like that would be, or we can't take. It would be a far better way of delivering that information, and it would flow better. Um, so yeah, I have some different things here. What else? Uranus smiled. Did something else here besides smile. Uranus did something else here besides smile. He didn't smile. He, you know, he gets excited somehow maybe, but and you can't just say Uranus got excited. Uranus has to do something that indicates that he's excited. Um, or again, if you're from his perspective, you can say, um, Uranus felt excited if you want, but yeah, you can do that when you're with the perspective character. Let's see. Then here, Uranus is. Um, there's another one of these awkward transitions here where he asks him if he's been out. He says yes many times. And then Uranus is quiet for a long moment and then started to laugh. There's a lot of long moments in my story. People are quiet for long moments and then they do something. Um, so, and also there needs to be some other kind of exchange going on here, where you know it could be something like let's see, there needs to be another exchange here. Something like, I suppose I should just ask myself what I'd most enjoy doing during the following 25 years. Um, so yeah, I mean, there has to be some reason for him to suddenly get back on this track, at least for the reader's benefit. So anyway, that's my markup and my overall thoughts. I'm sorry it was rambling. It's very late. Um, and so these are just my thoughts. I'm going to then kind of edit this down, and maybe do a part two of this. So thanks.